Shalom and welcome to the Israel Policy Pod. I'm Neri Zilber, a journalist based in Tel Aviv and a policy advisor to Israel Policy Forum. The holidays are nearly upon us and 2025 is almost over, so you know what that means. The annual Israel Policy Pod end-of-year awards are upon us. It's truly a tradition unlike any other, especially since I don't think we did it for the last 2 years, for obvious reasons. But this highly prestigious ceremony and podcasting gimmick is really useful in order to look back at the historic, challenging, frankly crazy year that just was, take stock, and focus on what Israel and the Middle East have in store for us in 2026. If it's anything like the past year, well, I don't even want to think about it being anything like the past year, but as always, handing out the awards and predicting the future with me are Israel Policy Forum's very own Chief Policy Officer, Michael Koplow, and our dear friend and former colleague, Shira Efron, a senior fellow at the RAND Corporation and their distinguished Israel Policy Chair. And don't worry, just because this is the end of year episode, and it's a big one, doesn't mean it's actually the last episode of the year. We should have a few more for you before the ball drops, don't worry. But given the vagaries of Dr. Koplow and Dr. Efron's schedules, we're doing this now, a few weeks early. So if anything happens between now and December 31st, you know who to blame. But on a more serious note, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, our dear listeners and viewers. Remember, we're now a video podcast available on YouTube for all of your support this past year. Through wars and more wars and ceasefires and even, dare we say, some positive moments, I'm always amazed when people from all over the world, believe me, either write in or come up to me and tell me personally, I listen to the podcast. So thank you all truly for tuning in. It always amazes me. And if the mood strikes you as well, 'tis a season, as they say, so do make a donation to Israel Policy Forum. 2026 is sure to be the best yet. If not in Israel or the Middle East, that may be a bit too much to hope for, but at least for this podcast. With all that, let's get to Shira and Michael. Hi, Michael. Hi, Shira. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, Michael. Hi, Neri.
Shira, I'm so glad you've joined us.
She deigned to join us.
You didn't invite me last time. You went without me. I wasn't even aware until I heard you that you did this without me. I mean, you're allowed to. I'm not jealous. Setting the record straight.
Fair.
It's not like
fair. Neri and I had a good time, but it's not the same.
It's not the same. We can say that to your face now. I think we also pretty much said it on the podcast as well. So we're nothing if not consistent and honest. But yes, Michael pinch hit a few weeks ago, but you were sorely missed. But now you're here to join us in this very prestigious ceremony, our pseudo-annual end-of-year awards for the Israel Policy Pod for 2025. It was nothing if not a roller coaster of a year, filled with, well, all kinds of things that we're going to get into, looking back and taking stock. And then at the very end, I promise we're going to do predictions for 2026. And that'll be, I think, even more interesting. But enough chit-chat, enough small talk. Without further ado, let's get into it. Drum roll, please. The first Israel Policy Pod end-of-year award is for the biggest surprise of 2025. Michael, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm going to go with President Trump's positions on Israel-Palestine. I think that when President Trump came back to office, lots of people were expecting it to just be a rerun of his first term, where he effectively gave Israel anything and everything that they wanted without really asking for anything in return. And, we don't have to go through the entire litany, but, we all know the highlights: the embassy and recognizing Jerusalem and sovereignty over the Golan and literally building annexation upfront into his January 2020 peace plan. And this version of Trump is different on Israeli-Palestinian issues. And, he's still doing things that lots of people quibble with, but he's done things that are pretty surprising. Surprising to even, I think, to folks like us who tended to have different views of what we wanted to see. The Israeli right had these fantasies as soon as he came back that Israel would be able to do anything it wanted in Gaza without abandon. There would be no more restraints, and we were going to see West Bank annexation and the return of settlements to Gaza and Gush Katif. And
literally, the Israeli right here was physically dancing in the streets and saying 2025 would be the year of annexation.
Precisely. And what we've seen is that even before he took office, he effectively forced a ceasefire from January through March on an Israeli government that didn't really want it, and it was the Biden ceasefire. And we then saw him effectively strong-arm Israel into the actual, I hesitate to call it permanent, but at least so far, what looks like a permanent deal where the Israelis actually were trying to argue that Hamas had said no and the war should continue. And Trump said, no, sorry. I say that Hamas says yes. And so now you're going to do as I said. And not just he, but other Trump administration officials who in the past have been extremely supportive and even urging on West Bank annexation have come out and said it's a no-go. Trump himself has now said it multiple times in extremely forceful ways. I mean, literally saying he will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. So, if you're someone who's on the left or the center left, there's still plenty of things that you probably don't like about the Trump administration's Israeli-Palestinian policies. But the idea that this is going to be some sort of Israeli right-wing, fantasy land where they get anything and everything they want, that turns out to not have been the case. And I think that to me, I've said this before, if there was literally one thing that I wanted from Trump, it was putting West Bank annexation completely on ice. I didn't think that we were going to get it, and we've gotten it definitively, at least for now. So to me, this is the biggest surprise of the year.
I've been told that a certain president in Washington, D.C. very much likes to receive awards. So the fact that we started with Donald Trump and gave him the first award, I think that bodes well for all of us.
Hopefully he's listening.
Yeah, hopefully he and his people are listening. Thank you for that, Michael. Shira, what to your mind was the biggest surprise of 2025?
Well, I was also thinking about President Trump's actions. I think, we all wrote about it, right? The Israeli right sort of vision, the dream not coming to fruition, basically being crippled on any angle by President Donald Trump. But I think I'll just add to Michael said, and then I'll pick another one. I think President Trump made it very clear what he thought about, the UN. And the story goes that in his first term, he wanted to turn the UN headquarters into a condominium. And to think that the U.S., the Trump administration, would lead a UN Security Council resolution and ensure that it passes. And really, he deserves immense credit for this, right? With no Chinese or Russian veto, and have the words Palestinian state there and talking about a Palestinian authority, even though we are pathway to something. Yeah, but just to think that this would come, and to me, it actually demonstrates great strength and strategic, flexibility, just understanding that this is an institution that you have to harness in your favor and that is needed. And it doesn't show ideological rigidity, which I, commend them for doing this. I know, Neri, you want to say something, but then I'll have my pick for the surprise.
No, I was just going to say for our listeners and viewers, you're referring to the UN Security Council from last month about Gaza and the ceasefire it endorsed.
Right. 2803. We can tattoo it, add it to the list of UN Security Council resolutions. But no, it was a meaningful. It's a meaningful one, and the text is meaningful. The fact that the U.S. led it, not something that I think we would have expected, right? Them to do. And again, if we are in praises to the president, I think they deserve a lot of praise for this, for going this route. So that's the one thing. I think I have another positive surprise. As we were discussing over the past 2 years, the state of the hostages who will return and debating the numbers of how many living ones. And sadly, we know many of them have died in captivity, right? We talked about, I think, 41 have lost their lives in captivity. But all I've heard, including from intelligence folks here in Israel, is that Hamas does not know and will not be able to recover the bodies of many remaining hostages. We were talking about double-digit numbers. And I'm really, it's such a sad ending, but the fact that families of hostages, except for one who's obviously remaining, were able to have disclosure and bring them to a dignified burial. And I'd hate to say this is definitely not praise to Hamas. I don't want it to look like it, but I'm surprised that Hamas actually made an effort to bring back the bodies of the hostages. I did not expect this. On the living ones, we can talk. I actually, we can analyze why Hamas decided to actually give up on what we thought was its biggest asset in negotiations, and I think it's because they got what they wanted. But the remains and the bodies, really, and I'm surprised, and I'm very, very happy to admit that I was wrong, because I was anticipating a lot of, a few Rona rods, obviously the Israeli airman
Navigator
never returned. We were expecting a few cases of those, and for now we have one, and it's terrible enough. But I hope they find him and return him. But it's not the high numbers that I at least thought we were going to have.
Most certainly a very welcome surprise. And the one remaining deceased hostage still in Gaza, Ran Gvili, heroic Israeli policeman who was off duty and leapt to the defense of southern Israel and was killed fighting Hamas terrorists, and his body was taken into the Strip. So his family is still very much waiting for him to come back, but he's the last one. I thought you were going to go maybe bigger picture with that, Shira, because one of my biggest surprises of the past year is the fact that we actually got a Gaza ceasefire deal, and that Hamas agreed to release all the hostages as part of it. And that the war, as Michael said, for now has somewhat ended. I was very skeptical, as you both know, and as our listeners know, that we would be able to get to that point. Like you said, Hamas being convinced and then agreeing to release all the hostages almost at once. I mean, it's taken 2 months, but all the living hostages were released on one day, which was remarkable in and of itself. And that the Trump administration and the others, the international mediators, convinced / urged Bibi Netanyahu to agree to the deal. So for 2 years, we were kind of waiting for this big bang of a deal. And then we kind of got it very quickly, early October. And it just kind of happened, which was remarkable and a big surprise, because all of us were, I think it's fair to say, fairly skeptical that we could actually get to that point. We don't need to kind of relitigate how we got to it, but it was it was a surprise nonetheless. I mean, my official answer for the biggest surprise of 2025, it may be the most obvious: Israel's launching of a outright war against Iran back in June. I mean, as you and I both know all too well, Shira, and as our listeners know as well, I was very much surprised by the launching of the war, the timing of the war. I was not in the country, so by definition, I got stuck for a few days until I was able to make it back. But massive surprise that Bibi Netanyahu went for that highly risky move militarily. B, that the Americans signed off on it, even if it was just kind of a yellow/orange light. And then C, that the U.S. President Donald Trump, yet again, surprised us by actually getting involved with Operation Midnight Hammer, the bombing raid on Iran's nuclear facilities. So all of that combined, I think, was a massive surprise. It seems like it happened ages ago. It was just this past year. So major surprise. I think my honorable mention will go to the strike on Doha on Hamas headquarters on September 9th. That's my honorable mention for the biggest surprise of 2025. Nobody expected that when it happened, one bright afternoon, but it happened. And And with regard to that surprise, nobody can convince me that Israel didn't get the tacit agreement of the Trump administration. Michael is laughing.
I think I've come around on that as well. People might remember that I was wavering as to what I thought, but I'm with you, Neri. I think at this point, there's no way they didn't know about it ahead of time.
No way.
The question is, what is ahead of time and what is knowing? If there's
what are you
no,
getting another PhD?
But I'm saying that if it was like, oh, by the way, we're doing this now, and it's like, wait, now, and it's right in time to turn off some systems, but it's not in time to weigh the pros and cons. Anyway, I don't have information as to whether the United States knew or not. I think, Neri, you were cheating. I think you chose 3 awards. You had the strike on Iran. You had the ceasefire deal. You have the strike on Doha. I mean, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say I might have more in some categories, but have zero ideas for others. So I can choose what I'm in.
I like this precedent for my next 7 answers.
These are like what I hear happens in youth sports. Everybody gets a medal, so every event gets an award. No, I wanted just to get it in there because those things really did surprise me.
But now you give me another idea for 2. Okay, now I'm going to go with 2 for my next one.
Okay, well, Shira, you can start us off on the next award. The second award we'll be handing out goes to the most underappreciated or undercovered story, issue, event of the past year. Basically, what flew under the radar but really should have gotten more attention over the past 12 months.
Okay.
That's the award.
But where are we going to get to the biggest winner, right? Because
that's the biggest prize. I feel bad for Donald Trump, though. I don't know. I mean, maybe he can get 2 prizes.
As many as needed.
Every category. Sorry, go ahead.
If he can get a FIFA Peace Prize while he wants a Nobel Peace Prize, then I'm sure we can give him multiple awards too.
Feels medal for math. I mean, but honestly, it doesn't. It's not about awards. Yeah, we have to give credit where credit is due. What is underappreciated and undercover? I think, Neri, you just gave a few examples of this insane year, right? So every week here, there's not a week that goes by without something crazy happening. So it's really hard to choose. So I think relatively under the radar, because everything else seems so much bigger, and this is more continuous, is there are the processes that are happening in the West Bank. There's Michael spoke about annexation that was stopped and vetoed by the Trump administration, but that is the de jure official annexation. There is de facto annexation that is that is taking place in a variety of forms we won't get into, but in very sophisticated ways, using ecological farms and as a means of taking over land with the full support. I mean, it's an enablement. Structures, facilitation of the government. There's, of course, the economic situation in the West Bank, suffering reduced revenues, reduced tourism, reduced taxation as a result of lower economic activity in the past 2 years. But also what had happened is, of course, the fact that Israel withholds tax revenue funds that it collects on behalf of the Palestinian Authority. That's part of the agreement, but Israel doesn't transfer the tax revenues. It's been but it's been over 6 months. I think it's the longest period in modern years that people have not received salaries. We're talking of many, many, many civil servants in critical positions. And, because I am usually quite tough on the Palestinian Authority, I think they need to undergo reforms, right? But to our U.S. listeners, we just saw what happens when there is a government shutdown in the U.S. and people don't get their paycheck. Mm-hmm. And how scary that is. And it's almost a miracle that the Palestinian Authority has not completely collapsed so far, and that people still go to work. even if it's part-time and even if non-motivation. I really think it's, in a sense, I never thought I'd say this, but it's pretty commendable that they're continuing to function under current circumstances. And of course, in addition to the territorial, economic dimension, there's the security issue Israel has been fighting. Hamas also in the West Bank, and that included a lot of activities against Hamas in the refugee camps in the West Bank, but also daily raids in city centers, stuff that we had not seen previously, right? For the idea to go at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Monday into the security square, security square in Ramallah. Those are things we just have not seen. And of course, last but definitely not least, is the settler violence. It's not the way of it's Jewish terrorism. Of course, it's not the entirety of the settler public, not at all. But this is a problem that is not addressed in the full seriousness. And it's appalling, it's immoral, it's extremely dangerous. And we are seeing that the Trump administration is taking notice. So when we do hear Netanyahu says something about it, now to say something about it, it's clearly in response to U.S. pressure. But something has to happen, and that has to stop. And sadly, it's not what we're seeing at the moment. So I'd go with this story.
Absolutely. The West Bank, I think in normal days, would be front and center in the conversation, on the front pages of newspapers, leading broadcasts. But given all the other fronts, I know this firsthand, it's gotten short thrift. But all the things you just said, Shira, are extremely worrying, each one on their own, but combined, and then combined with Israeli government policy and this Israeli government's policies on the ground. It's nothing short of a massive transformation on the West Bank from a position that wasn't great to begin with, even before this year, let alone 3-4 years ago.
Right. And I just want to add to this, because I think this is something that at least my friends in Israel don't get, is that when there's a meeting between President Trump and MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, right, and speaking about normalization and what does he want? We have a ceasefire in Gaza, and this lack of understanding that when others look at the Palestinian arena, obviously they don't just look at Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank and the processes there. They undermine, I think, a lot of the chances for what Israel wants from existing partners and potential partners in the future. And this is perhaps because it's underappreciated and underreported also in Israel, this story.
Michael, thoughts regarding the West Bank and also your most underappreciated or undercovered issue of the past year?
No question on the West Bank. Shira is completely right. You understand how it happens, right? There's been so much focus on Gaza, but we've said on this podcast many times, if it weren't for October 7th, the West Bank would be front page news almost every single day. And, we're now in something of a post October 7th period, given the ceasefire and phase one of what's going on in Gaza and all this activity around moving to phase two. And, you're seeing a little bit more coverage of the West Bank, but it's still not nearly where it should be. And it's going to be a much bigger story. And I hope that people are on top of it before it metaphorically explodes in their faces. For my undercovered, now that we're doing multiple, I'll start with my honorable mention. Really underappreciated, which is
I've created a monster.
You have created a monster, which is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I think everybody understands it was covered. Everybody understands that it did not work. But sorry, Neri, you look like you were about to.
No, I was going to say, I was like undercovered. I mean, I personally, and then all my other colleagues in the media, we spent a lot of time and a lot of words on that. But sorry,
quite obsessed.
Yes, I'm not going to argue that it was. I'm not going to argue that it was undercovered. I do think there's an aspect that is still underappreciated, which is that even though the GHF obviously didn't work, and I've harped on this before, but I just can't let it go. People still insisted on repeating the numbers that they would give out of meals that they provided. And I think what's still underappreciated is that the GHF did not provide even one meal to one person. they provided a 45-pound box of dry goods that had to be cooked without cooking utensils or cooking materials or working kitchens. So, you want to say the GHF provided however many tons of supplies, that's fine. But people still keep on repeating this nonsense about the GHF providing however many tens of millions of meals or hundreds of millions of meals they claim to have provided. And in reality, they did not provide one meal to one person. So that I think is underappreciated. That's my honorable mention. The real thing I want to focus on is, and this is definitely undercovered, is Israeli treatment of Palestinian prisoners. And this is going to make some people upset, but it's important to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
People will remember that when living hostages were about to come home, there was all sorts of talk in the Israeli press among American Jews about how the hostages were going to be in very bad shape. It's what people expected, and I think that they ended up being in better shape than we thought, but certainly they went through horrific torture by Hamas. But people said, oh, watch what happens, juxtapose Israeli hostages with the Palestinians who are released from Israeli jails. And as it turns out, many of the Palestinians who were released from Israeli jails were in abhorrent condition. They had injuries. They had injuries that were untreated. There was evidence of torture and beatings and starvation. Almost all of them had scabies, a thing that happens in overcrowded situations. There was an audit from the Israeli Justice Ministry, the Public Defender's Office, a few days ago of Israeli prisons. I think they went to 8 Israeli prisons. And what they reported was that in every single one of them, Palestinian prisoners are being horribly mistreated. Again, they're not getting medical care. They're not being adequately fed. They're being beaten. It's disgraceful. And to the extent that there's been a scandal in Israel over treatment of Palestinians in Israeli custody, it's been the State Haman affair, which hopefully is on people's radars. This was the thing that led to the removal of the military advocate general. Effectively, there was Neri, you're always better explaining stuff to our listeners than I am, but effectively there were Palestinian prisoners who had alleged to have been sexually abused and tortured by Israeli reservists. And when the military police came in to arrest those reservists, there was effectively a January 6th type movement where Israeli protesters, including members of Knesset, stormed the State Haman military base in protest that these reservists were being arrested. And the scandal in Israel isn't so much that these allegations happened. It's that the military advocate general leaked a tape of it happening. People are more upset that it was exposed than it happened. And this is what happens when you have Itamar Ben-Gvir as national security minister controlling the Israeli police, where he walks around boasting about the horrible conditions he has instituted for Palestinian prisoners. It doesn't matter what you think of Palestinian prisoners, and many of them absolutely deserve to be in Israeli prisons. If we're going to talk about Israel as a democracy and we're going to hold up Israel favorably in comparison to all sorts of other authoritarian countries in the region, then this absolutely cannot go on, and there can't be any justification for it. And this week, Itamar Ben-Gvir and 4 other ministers from his party, Otzma Yehudit, literally wore yellow newspins on their lapels in the Israeli Knesset to show their support for a bill that they are introducing to reinstitute the death penalty for terrorists. Now, think whatever you want about that bill. Maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's a bad idea. These are Israeli ministers who are purposely taking the imagery of the yellow ribbon for hostages and turning it into a yellow hangman's noose. Nothing about that is okay. And if you look at that and you laugh and you say, oh, ha, 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 look at how well they're owning the libs. Look at how well they're trolling folks on the Israeli left. This is exactly how you get to a situation where Palestinians are almost certainly being tortured in Israeli prisons. And very few people care, and it almost never gets reported. So, this does not obviously put Israel in a good light, but the standard shouldn't be what does or doesn't put Israel in a good light. The standard should be what should Israel be doing or not doing. And this is somewhere that we see all sorts of very terrible Israeli behavior. And I think if there were more focus on it, perhaps it would stop.
Very strongly put, Michael. Very well put. I think it's an issue that deserves more attention. And by the way, not only attention by people outside of Israel, but by Israelis themselves. Is this a country of laws and a democracy or not? Is the IDF a real Western military, or is it a militia? And people like Ben Gvir and others maybe have their answers. They would rather it be a militia in the service of a certain ideology and a certain worldview. But that's not what this army and this country were built as. And I dare say they, for the most part, it's not how this country and this military have acted over the past 8 decades of its existence. With, again, there have been certain exceptions here and there, but this is, like you said, coming from the very top and being allowed to happen. And it's a direct result of putting someone like Itamar Ben-Gvir in such a powerful ministerial post where he has this kind of influence. So thank you for bringing that up. I mean, it's going to be a sharp transition, but I'll stay on the theme of maybe more domestic Israeli affairs. I'd argue my award for the most kind of underappreciated or undercovered story of the past year, and really over the past few months in particular, is the big issue domestically in Israel of ultra-Orthodox conscription into the military. So Haredi enlistment in the IDF. This may come as a surprise to our Israeli listeners and viewers because it's such a big issue here, but that's precisely why I'm bringing it up, because I don't think it's fully understood outside of Israel how big of an issue it is domestically. Literally, it's the top story, has been the top story now for weeks, if not months. And again, you see it's not just polling numbers. The vast majority of the Israeli public and really the Israeli Jewish public in favor of enlistment, a real enlistment law for the Haredim, for the ultra-Orthodox. It's the stories you see and the people you see raising their voice against what this current government wants to pass as a real conscription law. You see religious nationalist reservists and their families getting up and saying it's a disgrace that we have served for 300, 400, 500 days over the past 2 years, and the whole segment of Israeli society is exempt. You hear parents of fallen soldiers, again, in the media or even in the Knesset, getting up and saying, why did my son fall in battle and your son is not even enlisting and in defense of the country? Is my son's blood less equal than your son's blood in terms of the defense of the state of Israel? And again, this issue dominates, on a daily basis, the discourse here. And yet, Netanyahu and his government, at least for now, are rhetorically and otherwise posturing like they want to pass the current bill that's being debated in the Knesset committee. But the interesting thing is that Netanyahu's inside Netanyahu's coalition, there's a mini rebellion brewing, not only from certain religious nationalist Knesset members and even ministers, i.e., kind of pro-settler ministers, but even from within the Likud, from MKs that understand how wildly unpopular this issue is and how wildly unfair this issue is. And again, whether they're doing it for kind of political gain and, they're trying to, figure out what their next steps are, or whether they actually believe what they say publicly, these politicians from within the Netanyahu coalition, it's immaterial. Because on this issue, literally the only issue for the past 2 years that they've actually dissented from the party line dictated by the prime minister up top. So I think for everyone on the outside of Israel, I think this is a major issue, which will have kind of ongoing ramifications, which we can get into in the predictions for 2026. But I thought it would be important to highlight that, and also throw in some kind of domestic Israeli politics, to balance out all the love for Trump and all the Palestinian affairs. Moving right along, the third award we're going to be handing out is for the biggest loser of 2025. Michael, do you want to start us off? The biggest loser of 2025?
Sure, I'll start us off. Honorable mention, Bougie Herzog. Bougie Herzog.
Oh.
There is no way that Bougie Herzog, the president of Israel, there's no way that Bougie Herzog wants to be put in the position that Netanyahu put him in, where he's submitted this official request for a pardon. Of course, it's not really a pardon because a pardon involves admitting that you've done something wrong or being found guilty. What he's asked for is for Bougie to just make his trial go away without admitting any guilt. And Bougie now has to decide whether he is going to come up with some sort of agreement that allows Netanyahu off the hook in return for something else. And if he does that, he will inevitably make probably a majority of Israel and Israelis very angry. Or he can decide he's going to do nothing and make a significant minority of Israelis very angry and hand Netanyahu a very potent campaign issue for the next election to stir up his base. Definitely not a position that Bougie Herzog wants to be in. And so he's my honorable mention for biggest loser of 2025. But my real answer is American Jews.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're not doing too well, in case people haven't noticed. Obviously, anti-Semitism is up in all sorts of ways. We are being squeezed in every direction, right and left, whether it is left-wing protesters outside of a very prominent synagogue in New York protesting an organization that is there to explain to American Jews how they can make Aliyah, and having Zoran Mamdani, the incoming mayor of New York, say, well, that wasn't okay, but also synagogues shouldn't or sacred spaces shouldn't be used in violation of international law, which isn't really isn't really a thing, and in my opinion is not even remotely relevant in this case. We have Tucker Carlson hosting effectively a neo-Nazi, Nick Fuentes, on his podcast, and having that be defended by some of the most prominent Republican institutions like the Heritage Foundation, having President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance kind of wave it away and reiterate that Tucker Carlson is their good friend. We have Marjorie Taylor Greene just this week, and who's now in some places almost becoming a hero on the left because of her falling out with President Trump. We have her saying that the reason she doesn't vote for anti-Semitism resolutions in Congress is because there's way too much focus on this issue, and also she's not in AIPAC's pocket, as if AIPAC has anything to do with resolutions condemning anti-Semitism, as if this should have anything to do with how you feel about Israel or pro-Israel organizations. And we have opinions in this country all over the place becoming scarier and scarier by the day. I'll mention the Yale Youth Poll, which was released, I think, a couple of days ago, that has all sorts of terrifying numbers on anti-Semitism and Americans holding anti-Semitic views. I mean, people should Google it. I'm obviously not going to go through all of it, but I mean, you got 21% of all Americans agreeing with the statement that Jews in the United States are more loyal to Israel than to America, and 40% of voters saying they neither agree nor disagree. And when you look at 18 to 22-year-olds, 30% of them agree that Jews in the United States are more loyal to Israel than to America, and 35% say they neither agree nor disagree. And you have numbers like this on, there's a question about whether Jews in the United States have too much power. Again, here, it's 16% overall agree with that, and 31% don't have an opinion. They neither agree nor disagree. And when you look at 18 to 22-year-olds, 27% of them agree that Jews in the United States have too much power, and 26% say they neither agree nor disagree. So
Wow.
that's a majority of 18 to 22-year-olds, a majority who do not disagree with the statement Jews in the United States have too much power. This is not going anywhere good. And that's before we even get to the fact that the Jewish community itself is kind of tearing itself apart over loyalty tests and purity tests and what we define as anti-Semitism and who we align with. So American Jews did not have a great 2025. I'm hopeful that 2026 will be much better. I'm hopeful that because the Gaza war is over, that will calm some of this down. But American Jews did not have a great year.
That is a horrific choice, but arguably correct choice, Michael. Thank you for explaining and elucidating what's happening closer to your neck of the woods, which I don't think is often appreciated by Israelis, frankly, how difficult the past 2 years have been outside of Israel. Obviously, it's been hugely difficult inside of Israel, but not only. Shall I go, Shira? Shall I give my award for the biggest loser of 2025?
Whatever you want.
It's the nicest you've ever been on the podcast, trust me. No, look, my biggest loser of 2025, Iran. Iran, yeah, it's a good choice, isn't it? For those who can't see Shira's reaction. I think it's very clear. Obviously, this comes after not a great 2024 for Iran, given what happened to its close proxy and ally Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the two exchanges between Israel and Iran that happened in 2024, the first time ever that there were two countries are firing at each other. But, the June war, the 12-day war, was on a whole different level. And no matter if you think that it was, how did Donald Trump put it, a complete obliteration job vis-a-vis the Iranian nuclear program or not, it's very hard to argue with the fact that Israel came out ahead after the 12 days. Really a remarkable piece of, military action taken by Israel. And it wasn't a given that the war would look like that. Obviously, there was major damage on the Israeli home front and I think over 30 casualties, but far less than anybody could have imagined and what actually was officially estimated by the IDF. So I think Israel did a lot more damage to Iran than Iran did to Israel. Iran effectively has no air defenses anymore. Its nuclear facilities are either severely damaged or, completely damaged. Again, assessments differ. I was told a few days ago, Iran hasn't, to the best of anyone's understanding, hasn't even restarted enrichment, despite certain headlines here and there. Yes, they're trying to reconstitute their ballistic missile program, but that's essentially all they have, combined with all the domestic turmoil predating the war, but also coming out of the war. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is probably at his weakest point ever. He's not a young man by any stretch of the imagination. Succession battles inside Iran, to say nothing, by the way, I completely forgot to mention, the senior command was taken out in the early hours of the Israeli operation, a bunch of nuclear scientists. I mean, it goes on and on. So now, effectively, Iran is stuck between a rock and a hard place, doesn't really know which way it should go strategically, and is kind of just trying to lick its wounds and buy time while attention, I suppose, is focused elsewhere. But I don't think it's arguable that it came out a massive loser from 2025. And by the way, two things happened that could have implications for the future. Number one, Israel showed that it is willing and able to strike Iran in a real way, right? That wasn't a given. None of us quite knew that it was militarily possible. And number two, a U.S. president showed that he was willing to strike Iran, also a first. So, it doesn't augur well for Iran's future. And, maybe we'll get into it in the predictions about what 2026 holds for the Islamic Republic. Shira, you're up.
Okay. Um, it's almost like I want to take my time to respond to what you said, but I'll connect it to my
What do you wait? Do you disagree?
I think that the way we define what it means to be victorious and what it means to be loser is different. Speaking with Iranians and hearing in Iranian eyes, they had Israel and the U.S. come at them. They still fought until the last day. I know from Israeli defense officials who were really impressed with the fact that with no air defenses, they kept firing. And Neri, if you came back to Israel, I think by then you were back here. The last day here was oh my God. I mean, they kept firing. They
kept firing
a lot without air defenses. The fact that they, of course, I don't think they have the full truth, so they overestimate the damage they made in Israel. But the fact that they were able to penetrate the most sophisticated air defense systems in the world is for them an achievement. And the fact that they imagine, they think that what Israel really wanted was a regime change. And in Iranian...
Which is not true.
I don't think Israel didn't want it. I don't think this military operation was designed to achieve that. Of course, Israel wants regime change.
Correct.
I mean, Iranians want regime change, but I think this was the plus. But I'm just saying from Iranian eyes that the Iranian people showed resilience and that they have not lost. The fact that they're still standing, in their eyes, this means that, yeah, we lost this battle, but not the war. And from an Israeli standpoint, right, always, what were the three pillars of Iranian deterrence? It was obviously the being a nuclear threshold state, the missiles, and the proxy network. And on each one of them Iran is much weaker. I agree with you that in this round, Iran is much weaker, but have we solved any of these problems? We're seeing that it's harder on the proxies, but we just got a shipment of short-range missiles to Hezbollah a couple of weeks ago, and they're still arming the Houthis, and they're working in Iraq. It's going to take more time, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to try to strengthen, again, the proxy network, and we'll see when it happens. On the missiles, we already know that they're working on different variants that they have. We know there was this report now on Pickaxe Mountain. There's more reporting on activity in, nuclear reactors, Natanz and Isfahan. And this enriched uranium, right, the 408 kilograms and different uranium, we don't know where it is. I am not saying that this has not, doesn't have that Israel doesn't have the upper hand, but did we push Iran further into, did we push them to make a decision to break into a nuclear weapon? And the jury is still out on that. So I think I'd be, what is our goal? Our goal is to change the calculus, and I'll just to change the Iranian calculation, right? This is our goal, and I'm not sure that this round of fighting has achieved this goal. I mean, there's so much to say about losers, and Michael was speaking about American Jews, and no, because I think it's true. I think I was just spending some time in Europe in different conferences, and what you hear then on anti-Semitism and European Jews, right? Like it's really difficult, and something that I think Israelis don't appreciate on other side. But I will say also on Iran, and connecting it to, we can all salivate here over the remarkable Israeli military achievements, and there were many over the past year, essentially, and the year before. But I think what the biggest loser is Israeli diplomacy. It's almost, we forgot this tool. It's like a tool that we don't have in the toolbox. And I will tell you something that a Lebanese friend told me. It's not mine, but it's good. So I'm not saying who this person is, but I'll paraphrase. He said, Israel is amazing. You guys are terrific. You can find the watch of Eli Cohen, a spy in the sand in Syria 40 years later after it was lost. You do these crazy things with the pagers. You attack here. You dismantle this. You have the best intelligence penetrations. But he said, but even if you have the best run in the casino and all the chips mount, at some point you go and you cash them in. Because otherwise the house loses. And we forgot that part, right? What do? There's the Israeli actions inadvertently, or sort of like it's a combination of really immense capabilities and sophistication and sheer luck, right? Having an opportunity to change the face of the Middle East. Gaza, I'm putting aside, but Syria and Lebanon And obviously, I mean, and changes even in Yemen, and you just mentioned Iran, and where are the agreements? Why are we not signing a security agreement with Syria? Why are we not pushing? I mean, it's true that Lebanon is not disarming Hezbollah the way it should, but are there steps, and were there steps that Israel could have taken in the past year to strengthen this process? And of course, with Iran, I mean, maybe it's not a popular view in Israel, but now, after we show that Iran is not 10 foot tall and Iran is on its back, instead of incentivizing it to push to a bomb, I think Israel should support efforts to reach an agreement with Iran. And we forget that this is sort of the next natural step after victory. So this would be my loser of the year, and I hope next year will be different.
Very worthwhile choice. I like outside the box thinking. And by the way, we don't always have to agree on the Israel Policy Pod. Disagreement makes for good podcasting. I'm curious to get Michael's we'll go with Michael for the tiebreaker. You know, Iran. How big of a loser or winner loser?
You know, I'm seeing you, Michael, next week. So like,
I'm going to see him too.
Yeah, I was going to say you're both going to see me next week. I tend to think that Iran is a bigger loser than winner of 2025. Not, of course, that Shira was saying that Iran is. I know.
I did not say Iran is the winner. Definitely loser, but I think we should.
Yes. Just
look, as a wise U.S. president once said, there are only two types of people in this world: winners and losers. So, you know, and we're going to get to the winners in just a second. Sorry, Michael.
I do think Iran was a big loser this year, and I also agree with Shira that Israeli diplomacy seems to be something that is gone. You know, we could even mention the fact that the foreign ministry has kind of been in many ways hollowed out, and you know, there does seem to be only one tool in the Israeli toolbox these days.
So, point for Shira, point for me, to be continued.
Israel Policy Forum is a policy organization rooted in the Jewish community. Our mission is to build support for a secure, Jewish, democratic Israel through a viable resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, advancing pragmatic U.S. policy towards the conflict, U.S.-Israel relations, and regional diplomacy among policymakers and community leaders. We promote policy measures endorsed by credible security experts, develop analysis and commentary, and convene programs that engage and educate leaders across the political, denominational, and generational spectrums. Our Young Professionals initiative, IPF at TEED, works to elevate the discourse among next-generation leaders by building community and facilitating engaging programs related to Israeli-Palestinian affairs. To learn more about our work, visit us online at israelpolicyforum.org and follow us on social media. If you rely on Israel Policy Forum for credible and nuanced analysis, please make a tax-deductible gift today at ipf.li/supportthepod or at the Support the Show link in the show notes.
I think the biggest surprise, if not 2025, then this podcast episode is that for the biggest loser of 2025, nobody brought up the name Benny Gantz. So he will be my honorable mention.
Can we just make him sort of the perennial Israel Policy Pod loser, and we don't even have to mention him?
Name the award after him. I think that's unfair. How dare you insinuate that, Michael Koplow, and definitely not Neri Zilber. But look, I think he's at least a two-time winner of this award, going back to a couple years ago. But I looked it up before we started recording. Do you guys remember how many seats Benny Gantz and his National Unity Party were polling in December of 2024?
Was it 40? 35?
No, you're thinking,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the previous ones.
Yeah.
No, December 2024, I don't remember.
19. Still very high. He was the second largest party, according to the polls, behind Likud a year ago. And now, as some of our listeners may be all too aware, he's below the threshold for entry into Knesset, i.e. he doesn't even get 4 seats. And yet another close political ally, Gadi Eisenkot, broke from him earlier this year. So it's a long list of allies and number twos that Benny Gantz has not been able to get along with. And now his political future is very much in doubt. And by extension, the prospect for the anti-Netanyahu bloc is very much in doubt in the next election. If he runs alone and doesn't get into the Knesset, he could waste votes and waste seats. Again, depending on whether you think Benny Gantz is still in the anti-Netanyahu bloc these days. But I was at the demonstration in Habima Square in central Tel Aviv a few Saturdays ago, and this was really the first time that most of the opposition leaders came out publicly together to protest. It was in favor of the establishment of a state commission of inquiry into the disaster that was October 7th. So Naftali Bennett was there, Gadi Eisenkot was there, Yair Lapid was there, Yael Golan was there, as was Benny Gantz. And Benny Gantz, and I was watching closely next to the stage, Benny Gantz stood in a corner by himself. Not only did he not exchange a word with the other political leaders, the opposition leaders, he didn't even exchange a glance with the other opposition leaders, and the feeling was mutual. Let's put it that way. So his political future is very much in doubt, as is Israel's political future by extension. So I think honorable mention to Benny Gantz, because whatever he's tried to do over the past year has not worked. So hopefully next year he'll make better decisions. Yalla, moving right along, the fourth and final end of year award, and it's a big one. The biggest winner of 2025. Michael, you want to start us off?
I'm going to go with Ron Dermer.
Oh,
there are more obvious picks. I won't even do an honorable mention because I don't want to take one of the other picks away from one of you guys potentially. But I'm going to go with Ron Dermer. Ron Dermer's he's said this for years. Kind of the mission of his life was to get Israel and the United States to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities. And he spent decades trying to make that happen. And this is the year that it happened. And I think that he probably worked on this issue more. I don't want to say for longer, because Bibi Netanyahu, of course, has been talking about this forever as well. But I'll bet he worked on this issue more than anybody else. And he got it. And not only that, he was at some point this year appointed in charge of the hostage negotiations. He got widely panned for the job he was doing. Hostage families were very upset with him. But guess what? We're sitting here now at the end of the year, and except for the body of Ron Gvili, all the hostages are back. And I have no idea what role he played in that. Whether he was helpful, whether he was an obstacle, doesn't really matter. This was the thing that was put under his purview, and it actually happened. And then, for the cherry on top of the sundae, he retired. So he now no longer has to
retired.
Yes, I know, retired.
In quotation marks.
Yes, retired in air quotes. But he's no longer Israel's strategic affairs minister. It means he's free to do other things. I'm sure that he's going to play a Jared Kushner type role, and that he's going to be heavily involved behind the scenes. Prime Minister Netanyahu is still going to lean on him for all sorts of things, but he's now officially a private citizen. There are rumors that he's going to move to the United States. So he may end up making a lot of money, hanging out in Miami, not having to deal with any of the domestic Israeli political mishigas. He literally got the thing he wanted most in the world from a policy perspective. And he gets to sail off into retirement and kind of now do things behind the scenes to the extent that he wants to do them. So hard to think of somebody who had a better year than Ron Dermer.
Okay. I like this equal opportunity bipartisan podcast that we're running here. Shira, who's your choice for the biggest winner of 2025?
Okay. Because I have two, but I'll make quick. So I think one, because you mentioned the strike on Qatar, and that made me immediately think of Qatar. I think Qatar started this year not great. There was clear mounting, loss of patience toward Qatar's position on Hamas. It was very clear that they're not exerting the pressure that they should have had and the leverage they should have had with Hamas. That was, people started questioning this idea of okay, you hosted Hamas leaders. supposedly because it was convenient for everyone, you had the leverage, but clearly by now you should have realized those are liability. Why are you doing this, and why are you not exerting the pressure on them, undermining Egyptian efforts, right? It was very clearly that Qatar was losing its position. I'm not sure how it was felt in Washington, but certainly in Israel and around the world. And then Israel, in a very strange strange decision, decided to strike in Doha. I'm not putting the U.S. I'm putting the U.S. aside on this, but the Israeli decision making here, the calculus doing this, was something that Qatar could have taken either way. But Qatar is very good at, when life gives you lemon, you turn them into lemonade. And I mean, talking about they definitely have not missed the opportunity to turn this lemon into lemonade and turn this crisis into an opportunity. I mean, Qatar is the darling now of different parties. They are the mediators between different conflicts, even countries that can't stand the Qataris, and it includes their neighbors. Everyone has to be nice to them, even if it's a piece of paper that's not worth much. They elevated their status in Washington, right, in terms of the alliance. The Doha Forum in Doha, obviously, which took place on Saturday through Monday this week. We're recording now on Tuesday, so it just ended yesterday. Was the biggest in many years with world leaders. You had Don Jr. on one stage and Hillary Clinton on another, and Shira on this. So kudos to them for leveraging what should have been, from their perspective, they were attacked by a U.S. Ally, but that's after they were attacked by another U.S. ally, right? They were also attacked by not by a U.S. Sorry, they were attacked by Iran, right? The fact that Iran attacked a U.S. base, but it's still on Qatari soil. That's how the Qataris see it, whether it's coordinated or not coordinated by this. And then they were attacked by Israel, attacked by both countries this year, but they definitely seized this opportunity to elevate their status, and kudos to them. The other one is Shira, the president of Syria, formerly known as Jolani. It's been a year now since Bashar al-Assad fell. This one person that there's still a lot of suspicions on what he believes in his heart, and has he really changed, or is he the jihadi in a suit and tie? There are a lot of concerns regarding stability in Syria, especially parts outside of Damascus. But Syria is in a different place. You have Syrians for the first time going back to Syria. I was just in a place. It was very easy to recognize the Syrians in the audience. They all have the same hairstyle and the same beard. He's a model for Shira, for admiration, and I think against really all odds. I mean, the welcome he's had not just in Washington, the Saudi backing and the backing of many other countries around the world, really cheering for his success. Basically, unconditional removal of sanctions, things that have happened at a speed that I had not anticipated, and it's because of who he is. The jury is still out if this is going to continue, and if we're going to be fairly disappointed in years to come. But he's definitely a winner of this year.
Both good choices. Looking back at the past year, my biggest winner of 2025. I have my official answer, then my unofficial answer. My official answer, I think, has to be the hostages that came out and their families. A year ago, it wasn't a given at all. And the fact that it took, months more for many of them was very, very difficult. But they all, like we were saying earlier, walked out of Gaza alive, which wasn't a given after 2 years of horrendous captivity. And the deceased hostages were brought back for burial to their loved ones. And it's, dozens of hostages, both alive and deceased, and by extension, dozens of families and hundreds of family members, and the entire country of Israel. And the day of the release right after the deal was signed and the ceasefire came into effect in October, was the best day of the year. By far, the best day of the year in Israel. I mean, I was in Hostage Square. It was just like a weight had been lifted off of everyone. And then Donald Trump came and spoke at the Knesset, so everyone was happy about that. But, really, it was all about the hostages coming back. And so I think the fact that they were able to survive those 2 years and come back, and obviously there was a ceasefire in January, February as well, and we got many of the hostages back as well. Then was remarkable, and there's one hostage left in Gaza, Ran Gvili. When he comes back, it's going to be the first time in 11 years that there is no Israeli hostage being held by Hamas in Gaza, dating back to 2014, the 2014 war. That in and of itself is remarkable to my mind, and a massive win for Israel, and not the government of Israel, not the state of Israel, but the people of Israel, and really the family is directly impacted. So I think that's an unadulterated good and a positive of the past year. That's my official answer. My unofficial answer: the biggest winner of 2025, Bibi Netanyahu. Bibi Netanyahu. If we just look at what he's been able to do over the past year, by the way, to give him credit, not only to get the hostages back, many of them still alive. Yes, he may have been forced into the deal, fine, but he was able to get a ceasefire in January and then violate the ceasefire and relaunch the offensive like he was planning all along, and was able to get Trump to agree to that. It's a win for him. Probably terrible for everyone else, but a win for him. Was able to not only launch the war on Iran, but also get U.S. active support for the war. Literally his life's mission. So I think if you ask Bibi Netanyahu, what was the best year of your life? Maybe he'd say 2025. Maybe 1996 too, when he was first elected. Probably.
Let's not forget, Neri. He spent more time this year in the United States than probably at any point since he lived here, and we know how much he loves that as well.
That's exactly right, and he's set to make his sixth visit to the U.S. to meet with Donald Trump. These visits and summits between an Israeli prime minister and a U.S. president used to happen maybe like once a term, twice a term. Now it's 6 times in 1 year. And again, you can say, well, it's Donald Trump and it's unorthodox, but Bibi Netanyahu is still getting the invitations, no matter what happens later this month.
Yeah, but Neri, you need to remember that he can't go to 95% of other countries with which Israel has diplomatic ties.
Look, I didn't say everything. I didn't say everything was. I didn't say everything was perfect.
No, I agree, and this is going to be. The trips are long, and this is.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
He's spending.
Right. The fact that he's still prime minister 2 years after, and October 7, and he looks like a leading. I mean, who knows what's going to happen next? Definitely a winner. There's no.
He's spending 8 days of his winter break in Palm Beach at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, I don't know.
Why are you being so petty?
It seems pretty good.
Yeah.
Why, as they say in Hebrew, tefalgen. Give credit where credit is due. He's getting away with the fact that he's able to go and spend 8 days doing who knows what in Florida later this month. But Shira, you're absolutely right. Over 2 years after October 7th, he's still in power. Not only that, he took a deal to quote unquote end the war. He still has a coalition. Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich didn't bolt like they had been promising for 2 years. The ultra-Orthodox left his coalition, people forget, and yet they're not actively trying to topple him. And he still has a coalition, and we'll get into how long this weird situation may last in just a moment. But at this point, decision to go to election may still be in his hands. So I think unofficially, my unofficial answer, the biggest winner of 2025. Bibi Netanyahu, it has to be that. There's no dissent with my argument, is there? No,
not from me.
Not here either.
No, Shira is shaking her head. Okay, we're done looking back. Let's get to what everyone is probably more interested in. What will definitely, certainly, assuredly happen in 2026. In the past, we've done these end of year awards and then the predictions. And going into every year that we've done this, we've called it, the coming year is going to be historic, momentous, critical for Israel. That's usually true because it's Israel, and it's been a pretty wild last few years. But I dare say the coming year will be existential for Israel. That's the description I go to and reach to more often than not, because it's going to be an existential election year at some point in 2026. So Israeli politics, but also all the other fronts that we've been talking about: Gaza, Lebanon, Iran, Syria, the West Bank. So dealer's choice. Shira, do you want to start us off? A prediction for 2026?
Well, who's going to win the elections?
No, look, I don't know if anybody can say that. You can do whatever you want. It's your podcast.
Yeah. It's interesting you said it's going to be existential. I was hoping you'd say something like this year might be just like a normal, boring year.
Is that your prediction?
No, but it's like my hope, right? I'm conflating analysis with what I wish for. Just a little bit like peace and quiet, and the fact that and the other day I was thinking how nice it is to go to sleep and not just like anticipate to be awoken by missiles from different fronts, and calculate if it's worth going to the shelter, because if it's from Yemen, maybe but if it's from Lebanon, it's worth going. So we'll see how this year. I guess I want to be positive. I think that this might be even happen before the end of the year, but I think the fact that President Trump seems adamant, and Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, who's leading this, adamant about continuing to phase 2 of the peace plan for Gaza. I think that's going to happen. We're going to have some announcements by the end of this year. And I think contrary to what Israel would have liked, which is basically permanently dividing Gaza, bifurcating Gaza into 2 parts. In one part, there are no people, essentially behind IDF lines, and all the others on the other side, in the hope that this will melt Hamas away. I think we're going to see something where Israel will be pushed to slowly withdraw. And I think with that, and again, maybe I'm just wishing, I think there's going to be realization that without some Palestinian agency, this plan could not work. And therefore, what was been reported recently of senior U.S. administration, officials meeting with Hussein Sheikh in Ramallah, it's not that anyone is going to return the Palestinian Authority to Gaza, but I think we're going to see there's going to be realization that if we don't want this to be like CPA in Iraq, where there's a small liaison office that connects the structure with the Iraqis, and fail that you have to bring Palestinians in, and it can be just Abu Shabaab and clans. So I think my prediction is that we're actually going to see better implementation or some more successful implementation of the plan, phase 2, than what we would have expected and what Israel would have liked to see. So that's what I'm expecting on Gaza.
Those are very positive predictions. And basically, if I'm reading between the lines, you're saying Israel will be forced to implement further withdrawals back from the yellow line, which divides Gaza currently in half, which would be a big both military and political issue here in Israel, and that elements of the Palestinian Authority will be allowed to play some kind of role in the Gaza Strip, despite Netanyahu for 2 years saying no Hamas and no PA.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add to this, and this is what the diplomacy part that is so missing. Israel can reap a lot of diplomatic benefits for saying that they allow some gradual presence of the PA in Gaza, or accepting that there's a Palestinian nationalism component to this, and in the debate about reforms, which is not something that Israel needs to bring voluntarily, right? It is now grounded in Trump administration documents to say, okay, we agree with reforms, and these are the reforms we want, and be part of the conversation. Instead, Israel is going to be dragged into this kicking and screaming and missing the opportunities for diplomatic leverage. And I'll just say, we're recording now on Tuesday. For our listeners, the crossing from Jordan, the Allenby Bridge, has been closed for a good few weeks now as a result of a fatal terrorist attack that killed two reservist. I think it was two reservists in the crossing, and it's a second terrorist attack that's happening in the crossing. So really, really terrible. There's important humanitarian aid in winter, in Jordan, all the winterization, and we're heading into a big storm in Israel. All the tents are there, something that should have been in Gaza already, but also with implications to the West Bank. There's been the decision and the pressure on Netanyahu to reopen the crossing. It's been something I've been hearing about for at least a month, and I think as a result of Walt's U.S. ambassador to the UN, Waltz being now in Israel, Netanyahu today said, Allenby has to open today instead of doing it earlier, instead of doing it through a conversation with maybe King Hussein, instead of, so this is sort of the typical way of doing things here, which I think you're right, that Israel will be forced to do something that if it planned ahead and thought about it, it would be much better if it also came with an Israeli initiative.
Okay. I like those predictions. Michael, you're up.
I'll quickly tack on to Shira, not with my real one, but with my honorable mention that I agree. I also have an optimistic take on Gaza for 2026. I think that we're likely going to see the beginning of Hamas disarmament. Obviously not full, not to the extent that Israel wants, but I think that over the next year, we're going to see Hamas start to give up some of its heavy weapons, and that's going to be part of the progress that Shira is talking about in terms of moving to phase 2. But for my real prediction, I'll go in a different direction, which is Israeli politics, and I'll call back to something we were talking about earlier with Benny Gantz. My prediction is that Naftali Bennett is not going to be the largest vote getter among opposition parties when the elections happen. Okay. At the Neri, you look very confused by that prediction.
I like this. Who will be the largest vote getter?
I don't know who it's going to be, but at the moment, Naftali Bennett is polling at like 21, 22 seats, and after that, you've got Avigdor Lieberman at like 9 or 10, and Yesh Atid at 9 or 10, and Gadi Eisenkot at 9 or 10. Yair Golan at 9 or 10. Naftali Bennett, he entered politics very successfully. He formed that alliance with Lapid in the 2013 through 15 Netanyahu government. And ever since then, he has not been great at politics, to put it mildly.
True.
We'll remember before the first election of the 5 election cycle in 2019, when he and Ayelet Shaked were kind of like the big thing. Shira and I were sitting in a bar in the Shuk the Thursday night before the election. Ayelet Shaked walked in. I got a selfie with her back in April 2019. And in that election, so do I. In actually quickly funny story. I took that selfie, and then later that night, somebody on Twitter DM'd me and said, "Hey, are you in Israel?" And I said, "Yeah, how do you know?" Somebody else had taken a picture of me taking the selfie with Ayelet Shaked and had posted it on Twitter, and then somebody else spotted me in that picture. Anyways, in that election, they missed the threshold. They were completely out of the Knesset.
Right.
And Naftali Bennett obviously became prime minister in the changed government, but he was the smallest party in that coalition. The coalition fell apart because he could not keep his people in line. The reason that government fell was because 2 people defected from his party, Amichai Shikli and then Idit Silman. He couldn't keep his own people in line, and he then left politics. And then, as a result, when October 7th happened, and I think Israelis were desperately in need of a strong opposition voice, Naftali Bennett could chime in from the sidelines, but he hasn't actually been in the opposition. He's not in the Knesset. He's not actually in politics. So, he's been successful in many ways. He's been prime minister. He's been defense minister. but I don't think he has the greatest political instincts. And in this case, you have all of these center and left of center votes who, to use the Israeli term, are parking their votes with Naftali Bennett. He's a parking lot, and that's what we saw in the past from Benny Gantz multiple times. And as you pointed out, a year ago, Benny Gantz was riding high at 19 or 20 seats in polls, and now he's below the threshold. I don't think Naftali Bennett's going to drop below the threshold, but I do think that we're likely, as the elections come closer, to see Israeli voters looking for an alternative go to somebody else. And I think Naftali Bennett will do fine. But my prediction is that he is not going to get 22 seats and that he is not going to be the largest vote getter among current opposition parties.
Very interesting prediction. I would tend to agree with you on the fact that he's not a very good politician and that he usually starts very strong in the polls and then plummets, with two caveats. Number one, who else is out there? So the answer you often hear from, let's say, non-BBist Israelis is, I don't know who I'm voting for, right? So the undecided is probably the highest opposition party. Just I don't know who I'm voting for. I'm not happy with any of my options. So who else is out there that will be able to take those votes away from parking lot Bennett? And my second caveat is I think it'll all depend on where Gadi Eisenkot chooses to go. If Eisenkot joins up with Naftali Bennett, I think that'll bolster him and boost him. And if Gadi Eisenkot chooses, hopefully, to go with Yair Lapid, I think that'll be a big boon to Yair Lapid. I think one constellation may be easier to pull off than the other, and I'll leave our listeners and viewers to ponder which one is which. My prediction for 2026, and it's a near-term prediction, and it's the question on everyone's mind, really is, when are the elections going to happen? Now, by law, it has to happen until October 2026, and you hear kind of the pros here say, well, it'll either happen in September or maybe like June, July-ish. I have a different prediction. I think elections are going to be triggered in January, and they're going to happen in basically May. Well, April is Passover.
Passover.
But the interesting thing about the calendar this year, Passover is very early, and you have Passover, Pesach, in early April, but followed very closely by Independence Day, Memorial Day, and all of that. I think it's still in April. So my prediction is that elections are triggered in January because of the holiday. They'll happen in May. And this is a bit earlier than people imagine, but there are reasons for this prediction. Number one, I think all roads lead to January. So if you look at issues like passing a budget, right, or the ultra-Orthodox conscription issue, or even Netanyahu's ridiculous request for a pardon that's not really a pardon, and even, by the way, his meeting with Trump and maybe movement on phase 2 of Gaza, all of it is supposed to happen in, as they say here, the coming weeks, right? They want to pass the Haredi bill in the coming weeks, right? It's being debated right now in Knesset. The government just approved the budget, but it's meaningless because they have to pass it in Knesset, but they want to kind of do it quickly before the end of March deadline to pass a budget that already takes you into January. Bougie Herzog, as Michael alluded to earlier, said he'll make a decision, on this very serious and grave matter that he takes very, very seriously, and will make a serious decision on in the coming weeks, right? So all of it leads me to conclude that come January, either because the ultra-Orthodox will lose patience and this bill in Knesset about the Haredis is going nowhere, they'll either pull the plug, or Netanyahu himself will realize, I can't pass the Haredi conscription bill, i.e. I don't have a budget that I can pass in the Knesset, i.e. This coalition isn't long for the world because the end of March deadline to pass a budget is looming anyway, so I'm going to pull the trigger on an election. And as you both know, Israeli prime ministers love nothing more than to get up there on Independence Day and give a big speech and act the prime minister, because that bolsters them in the public eye. So that is
Wait,
my
Neri,
prediction.
okay. Your prediction is on the date,
I
and
love
I do agree with your analysis, but I mean, can you give a prediction
Thank
of
you.
your
What's going to happen?
what's gonna happen in the elections?
No, look.
What is Bougie gonna do with this decision about pardon, which is actually a decision to cancel the trial, right? It's not
So
and
basically,
then, sorry, I thought you were going to talk about the next round of Israel and Iran, but sorry.
No. First, okay, I will answer 1-1. I love how Shira, she's like, okay, she's calling me out on my on my rhetoric. Okay, look, I'm a daily newspaper reporter. My horizon is like maybe my next deadline. But be that as it may, I will answer your questions one by one. First of all, Bougie Herzog, right? The issue with the pardon, right? Netanyahu is not willing to leave public office. He's not willing to retire. That is essentially the core demand. There are other demands that are kind of floating around it, but the core demand is, okay, are you willing to actually leave office? This notion that you hear floated that he's gonna retire, he's gonna resign temporarily and then come back for the next election doesn't fly, because as we all know, if the election is deadlocked, you need to be prime minister to continue at the head of a transition government. So there's zero chance he either resigns temporarily, or definitely zero chance, less than zero chance, he retires completely. All right, so let's get that off the board. That is the major stumbling block for Bougie to pardon him. And yet, Bougie can get up there and say, as part of the wider package, all kinds of other things that the anti-Netanyahu liberal camp in Israel want. Bougie will say, look, it's not for me to decide whether Netanyahu can continue as prime minister. It's not for the judges sitting at the Supreme Court in Jerusalem to decide whether Bibi Netanyahu can continue as prime minister. We are going to allow the Israeli public to decide if Bibi Netanyahu can continue as prime minister. And as part of the deal, Netanyahu has to disperse Knesset and go to an election. And this will be a referendum on whether Netanyahu is fit, appropriate, whatever you want to say, to lead Israel. Okay, that's the pardon issue, and that's I think how Bougie may try to find his way out of the very difficult position that Netanyahu has put him in. All right. Your second question, war with Iran is not happening till after the Israeli election, if at all. Right. Netanyahu can't go. I'm speaking just in domestic Israeli political terms. Netanyahu can't turn around to the Israeli public next week and say, hey, by the way, I'm bombing Iran again because we didn't finish the job in this historic existential fight that happened 6 months ago in June. And I, basically lied to you. And by the way, you all have to go back into the bomb shelters again. No, it doesn't fit his message. The war of resurrection, as he likes to call it, the war of redemption, as he likes to call it. No, he will go into an election campaign as the great winner, the great victor of, he doesn't call it the war of October 7th. He calls it the war of not October 7th. October 7th was the generals and the IDF. Everything that happened after October 7th is, Bibi Netanyahu. That's a message he's going to take to the public. So zero chance, unless Iran does something frankly stupid, that Israel will trigger another war with Iran. And then finally, you say, who's going to win? Is that, what was your
the real question? Is Netanyahu still going to be prime minister? I think all three of us in the last 2 years have, declared the death of Netanyahu's political career, and he's clearly proven us all wrong. So, is he still going to be prime minister?
Is that like the final question, the real prediction?
Yes. Look, I'm taking over Israel Policy Pod. I'm now asking you, Neri.
Look, I don't think the honest answer. Nobody knows. There are a lot of moving parts. There are going to be new players that come in, different mergers. And acquisitions on the political stage. I don't think anybody can, either on a podcast or otherwise, can give you a straight answer. To borrow a phrase from Shira, I want to remain optimistic and hopeful. So I believe that not even Bibi Netanyahu and his remarkable political skills will be able to overcome the stain of October 7th and the massive damage that this government has caused, frankly, even before October 7th, and that if the opposition can get its act together and its ducks in a row, that it can somehow pull off a change in government. By the way, barring that, my other prediction is that Bibi Netanyahu will remain prime minister because there are going to be elements in the current opposition camp that will cross the lines and say, in the interest of national unity after 2 years of war, et cetera, we are going to join Netanyahu in coalition and save Netanyahu from the extremists on the right and the ultra-Orthodox, et cetera. But again, we can record a podcast before the next election where we can actually give our informed predictions. But for now, I'm just sticking to a May election. That'll have to do.
May election.
I think that last unofficial prediction or non-prediction is a strong one.
Yeah, it's not my official prediction. We went way over, but this was a massive end of year podcast. Shira, Michael, you have to go make dinner. I think those are appropriate parting words because life continues.
My
Michael,
prediction,
Shira,
prediction for the year for next year is that I'll still be making dinners. Not good dinners, but I still have to feed children. You and me both.
Thank you both for your time.
I'm 100% sure you're a better cook.
Is that the next award for next year? The best cook of the podcast, the best cook of the year.
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah. Chag Sameach upcoming. Happy holidays. Enjoy the new year, and I'll see you on the other side. Thank you both, as always. Take care.
Thank
you. Bye, guys.
Okay, thanks again to Michael Koplow and Shira Efron, as always, for their generous time and insights. Also, a special thanks to our producer, Jacob Gilman, our editor, Tracy Levy, and our assistant producer, Eden Jesselson, as always, and to all of you who support Israel Policy Forum's work. Do consider making a donation to Israel Policy Forum so you can keep being a credible source of analysis and ideas on issues such as these that we all care deeply about, including this podcast. And most importantly, thank you all for listening, and a happy holidays and Chag Sameach upcoming to all those celebrating.